Okay, everyone, we are live. How is everyone doing tonight? Hello, hello, hello. I'm excited. I know I say that every day because I am. This is Lisa Marie Aird with Campus Bound GPS October Tips, and we are at day 21. 21 is always a great number. I love that number. It's the day of my birthday, so 21 is a great number. But we're here. We really have 10 more days until the end of October. So we've been doing this, presenting to you information about the um, college application process. Every day we've been providing you a tip. And for those of you who do not know me, my name is Lisa Marie Aird. I am the Collegiate Success Coach for Campus Bound GPS, where we help students and parents navigate the college application process. And this is a service, this is a pleasure, it's a privilege to be presenting information to you. And what I do is I invite experts like who I'm about to introduce, to talk about different parts and pieces of the college application process because there are so many parts and pieces. And within the parts and pieces, there are parts and pieces. But I am excited today. This person, he is a friend of Campus Bound GPS. He is a longtime friend. We go back as far as high school. And I just want to say, welcome, Amado.
Hey, Lisa, thank you for having me.
So
Happy to be here once again.
thank you. So this is Amado Lambert, and he is, I'm going to call him one of my experts that talks when it comes to student athletes, when it comes to NCAA eligibility. He is all things that. And his tip tonight is why did I just go blank real soon?
Recruited.
Thank you. That's the word that I was looking for. I was like, wait a minute, I just drew a blank. I wrote it and I'm like, wait a minute. Get recruited. NCAA eligibility. Yes, get recruited. Ooh, how can I do that? Oh my goodness.
It's all good.
But it's the excitement. That's what it is. It's the excitement. I'm so happy that you're here. Oh my goodness.
It's great to be here. Yeah.
So, Amado, I'm going to have you take it away. I want you to introduce yourself. I want you to tell people who you are, where you're coming from, and the exciting news that you heard a couple of days ago.
Sure. Yeah. Well, my name is Amado Lambert. I am the head coach for the Mount Vernon City Schools. And why City Schools? There's not just one high school. There are a number of schools within the Mount Vernon area, the Mount Vernon campus on 100 California Ave, the Denzel Washington School, and the STEAM Academy. So, so the thing that I like most is working with young people and giving them the opportunity to advance their lives. And many young people enjoy sport and would like to do it on the next level. So this is my opportunity to share some information about that process and what it takes and the things that athletes, parents, and even educators and administrators need to know. So this is some new information that has just come down the pike. There was a conference, a webinar that had taken place within the last 2 days from the NCAA, and I'm here to share it with you.
Well, we are glad to have you here. So in the comments, Kim Varner says, hey, another classmate.
Oh.
And we are so happy that Kim has started sharing information so that others can know. Oh, I do have to say this because I'm really trying to promote the YouTube channel. Campus Bound GPS is new to YouTube. We are streaming live right now on YouTube. And please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Subscribe to the Campus Bound GPS YouTube channel so you can get notifications, so that you can hear information like this, so you can go back and look at the replays of these types of videos so that they can help you as you go through the college application process. So, Amado, What did the NCAA have to say about this whole student recruitment?
Yeah, well, I tell you, if we can go to the PowerPoint a
Sure.
little bit, um, it's a tip. Yeah, hang on. Oops. Oh boy. Am I
You're not on slideshow yet.
I'm not on a slideshow yet? Okay.
Uh-uh.
Apologies, folks.
Oh, no worries at all.
Okay, here we go. Here we go, friends. So, um, yeah. So my tip really is about the tip is to stay on top of this eligibility process, folks, because um, with COVID last year, we talked a bit about the process and all that was involved and what's changed and how it's affected young people with regards to the college bound process for student athletes. So this may seem redundant to some degree, but it's important to stay on top of it because there's some things that are similar to what we discussed last October with some new adjustments and changes. All right. So just to review what the eligibility process is, it's the eligibility center is basically the unit within the NCAA responsible for evaluating and certifying college-bound student athletes for collegiate competition at Division I and II schools. Um, it's important to note that the eligibility center, as far as what a student athlete that's college bound needs to stay on top of, is whether or not they're looking at being a scholarship student athlete, looking for student aid, that sort of thing, or if they're looking to compete on intercollegiate level at a school that may not be focused largely on scholarship type funding. Now, there's funding of all types at all levels, Division I, II, and III, but Division I and II are the ones that are the classic and type institutions that offer you know the coveted full ride or partial scholarship for student athletics. Division III, on the other hand, may not necessarily offer a full scholarship, but there are other types of funding. An important tip to note is that for Division III, um, there may be student athletes that may be seeking entry into some of the more prestigious schools, like let's say an MIT or Stevens Institute, Polytech, or something like that. Those are schools that may not necessarily offer student full scholarships, athletic scholarships, but they may offer, um, you know, uh, different type levels of consideration for
Grants.
grants and aid, and even just getting admitted. Right, for some kids, it's important to get that leg in. When we're talking about very competitive schools, um, just on the application, just on the standard application process, it helps to have a coach that's advocating on your behalf, to get into an MIT or a Stevens. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that's something that we emphasize. Our STEAM Academy in the Mount Vernon City School District is, one of our premier academic institutions with very strong students, and many of them may not be, you know, focused or have as their goal to compete at one of the big conference schools, but they may want to go to MIT or go to Stevens or any other school or RPI or something like that. It helps if they happen to also have some athletic capability to be able to put that in their application when they fill out a questionnaire. So the eligibility profile here for Division III would be the type that would be a simple profile. Okay. And I want to just move to the two counter types. The two counter types are the certification profile, and then the profile, the standard profile. The certification profile is a paid profile. That's one that you pay for, and then you submit that that fee. uh, when it comes time to register um, for consideration. And that fee for domestic students is $90, and for international students, it's $150. Okay, so apart from being a certified applicant for Division One and Two schools, you can be a profile registrant in the eligibility center, which is free of charge. Um, Now, what that does is that it does put you into the platform, but you don't have to worry about going through the screening process by the NC2A. Coaches can go through that platform from Division III schools who are looking for student athletes that have strong academics and athletic ability, but may not necessarily be that candidate for the Division I and II school. So
So let me
yeah.
see if I'm hearing this right. So
Mhm,
for a student athlete
mhm,
who is going through who may be a candidate for a Division III school, they don't necessarily have to pay that registration fee.
that's
But if
correct.
they're looking for if you're looking to play at the level of a Division I or Division II, that registration fee is needed.
That's exactly right. Yes.
Got it.
Okay. So that's what the two types of profiles are within the eligibility center. And it's important to know that. And all student athletes should. Now, part of our policy at Mount Vernon High is that we incentivize the registration process. One, because just the very idea of needing to meet certain academic criteria, right, keeps them in that mindset to keep books first. And so that's why I like the eligibility process more as a utility from keeping that aspect of the coaching game going, which is making the student athlete more of a student than
You know,
athlete.
the interesting thing is, so my son and my daughter were student athletes.
Mhm.
However, it was not required at, I wouldn't say required, it is always required, but it was not stressed that they should start putting their information into the eligibility center early.
Yeah,
And I know now the structure has changed. The way that it's working now, it's changed a little bit where you are encouraging student athletes to put their information in earlier.
yes.
I think it's more of a requirement now, right?
Well, not only so much certain sports. It's more common. Like now, you see it more common in the sport of in basketball and football. That a lot of these kids are being introduced to the eligibility center early because the process of building out and fleshing out a profile is pretty lengthy, pretty consuming, especially when you decide to do it at the last minute. Um, we weren't last minute applicants with my oldest daughter who played Division I softball, but we realized that even at the time that she had started it, around her sophomore junior year, that by the time senior year rolled around, there was a lot of, and when we were moving our profile from a standard free profile to a certified profile, that there was a lot of more information that needed to be collected, and we needed to detail with accuracy. So it's better to kind of do it as you go, as each phase of the student athlete in terms of their playing career progresses. You want to detail that experience in the eligibility profile process. So you enter that information as you go because you realize it becomes a pretty lengthy application process. So yeah, younger better. I've always encouraged, and in fact, I find that now that we have, modified programs coming into certain school districts, and especially when we trying to create more of an atmosphere where kids are, centered around meeting these eligibility standards, meeting the guidelines. The sooner you introduce it, the better, so that they get into the habit of just staying on track and monitoring their progress in their profile, as much as they keep track of their stats. you know.
Yeah.
So, you know what it is. When you go from, as your kids look at, the batting average, the point percentage, and everything else like that. Lisa, your kids, they went in and played college sports. That there is that need to see where your status is in the NCAA center. Are you cleared? Are you partially cleared? Are you a full qualifier? That's the name.
Yeah. And it's funny, Kim Varner, it was interesting that she said this. She put in the comments, just like a resume, keep updating it. You really need to keep track of your information. And I do like the fact that, you need to build it early. I know that since my children were in going through this process, it's changed up a little bit. But my daughter had gone to a exploration tournament, and it was one of the sponsored ones, and it was required for her to be a part of the eligibility center,
Mhm.
and the video part that she had to look at and all that information. She said, Mom, I wish I knew this when
Mhm.
I was a freshman,
Yeah.
because we didn't start doing it until her junior year,
Yeah.
and it is a lot to put in. It's a lot of information to put in. So,
It sure is.
parents out there, encourage your children, coaches out there, encourage your athletes out there, do it.
Yeah, I mean, you raise an important point when you talk about going to showcases and when you are, engaging with a college scout, that the conversation goes from, them making initial evaluation of the student athlete's gameplay. It could be your child, and they just want to have a casual conversation with you, or it can be, a casual conversation between, again, a scout, a college coach, and the coach and the high school coach, and the question invariably comes up, can you send me the PID? And if you look here in this slide on the bottom right hand corner, right, beneath Jane Doe's is that NCAA ID number, right? That's the PID. My guys know that like their telephone number. You know what I mean? Because it becomes a very important conversation piece, is that a coach knows that you're on your game if you can just provide a PID. And if a kid doesn't have a PID and you say, well, this kid's a junior or a senior at a certain point in time, and they ask for the PID, and you're like, well, what's that? Then unfortunately, that coach has to keep it moving, because just to get you going and get you started at a certain point in time might not be worth the time to spend recruiting that student athlete, no matter how talented they are.
Okay, so PID stands for?
Well, that basically it's really NCAA ID, but it's PID from the standpoint of player ID. That's
Gotcha.
what it is. Yeah, it's the player ID. All right. So yeah. So and that's important because again, when we look at why you need all this information, you cannot get an official visit. You cannot get a recruitment letter. You can't get a national letter of intent. You can't get anything, right, without at least giving some proof that you are in the system. Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I know I'm just flying along these slides, just giving the audience something to kind of look at and read. But then as we have our conversation, but these are just some things that I did go over last year that I didn't want to be redundant about, but they should tie in. What is an IRL? Okay, this is also very, very important, folks. Is that you cannot be you cannot have your profile once it's in the system and you're certifying, right? You've paid your fee. Okay. There are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids. I don't know, I've even gotten into the millions, but there's so many applicants, right, that are looking to be certified, right? The NCAA has decided that they would prioritize, all right, on this basis. And that is that there's an institutional request list, right? An institutional request list is the recruit list. A coach may refer to it as a recruiting list, right? And that's a college coach has a list of individuals that they wish to recruit, right? And they'll submit that information and say, well, I want to see and have the gateway open for me to screen out and evaluate this particular student athlete. At that point, that's when your application, your registration form, right, is now available, right, to be certified. it will not be certified unless there is that certification or that what IRL request, that request to actually officially open and establish you as a recruit. We've had, a number of individuals who were under the misunderstanding that they were being recruited, and the number of coaches that can basically throw the line out there, making you believe that you're being recruited, right? And so you're running around thinking, oh yeah, I'm being, recruited by Stony Brook, I'm being recruited by Clemson, I'm being whatever, and you're having conversations with a coach. They're checking, engaging where you are in the process. But you may not be as far along in the process as you believe, because when you look at your profile, there are task lists that are there, all right, that you're supposed to be keeping on top of and following and checking off those task lists. And if those tasks aren't complete, or if you hit a roadblock, then that draws up a red flag. A coach does not want to expose to the NCAA that they have a recruit that they're not going to go anywhere with, because they're going to be on the hook, because there's a certain number of individuals they can have on a recruit list at a time. And why would you give away your lifeline, right, early in the game? So they want to make sure that they have a high likelihood, a high percentage chance of getting you through the process completely, and not burn up, one of their tokens early. So know that unless you have an official recruit request by the recruiting coach, right, to have you on the recruit list, you're not being recruited. All right. And that's very important to know. So when you do get those letters, mom, dad, and even you, young student athlete, you should begin to question how far are you getting? Just like dating, right? Well, where are we going with this? Are we going any further than just the initial, whatever? But you got to basically be very clear on the intentions of the coach. Am I being recruited, and I'm not? Because you have as much right to look elsewhere as well. You shouldn't be stuck believing that you are a prize recruit in one place when you're one of a list of 10 possibilities and the recruit list is already established.
So
Right?
let me ask you this.
Yes.
You mentioned, well, I'll say this.
Mm-hmm.
As a parent of a former student athletes,
Mm-hmm.
I felt like a bystander because the coaches reached out to my children.
Mm-hmm.
They did not want to have any kind of communication with me as a parent.
Mm-hmm.
So how should parents play this part out? Because parents want to know, it's their child.
Yeah.
So do they need to understand that in this process they are bystanders, and they should, let the children do the speaking?
Yeah, you're in no way, shape, or form a bystander, and you have to, in a sense, you have to at this point put your kid right in front of the mic, and they have to be the voice, right, that the coach actually hears, but never ever give a coach or an athletic department the impression that the kid don't have people, right? You have
Okay.
to let them know
Okay.
that you're present, that you're there, and that you're keeping an eye on everything, right? And then you're aware of everything. You have to be aware of what the rights of the student athlete are. There's a code of conduct that a coach must abide by according to the NCAA, as does the student. And there are rights as a parent that you do have. You got to know what those are. And it's really simple. Is that you have the same rights, regards to your student athlete, your child, as you would with regards to how you interact with administration at the university. Well, it's different because at the university, the kid can actually sign off and opt out of having any information shared with you as a parent if they're of a certain age. But when it comes to this, you have to play it very carefully too. And this is a very important thing to keep in mind as a parent, is that if you come off as being someone that is overbearing and a Borinsky, right, let's say, then the coach may not be as overly excited about dealing
Your
with you, or
child.
may tier you, or may prioritize you a little bit differently. But there are levels to how you are involved. But it is very important for a student athlete to be able to speak up and handle the business of a process. it is a sign for a lot of college coaches that of how a kid is going to be able to handle themselves on campus. Dealing with department chairs, teachers, dealing with the bursar registration, whatever it is that there are processes that a student athlete has to be able to handle themselves. They have to show a level of self-efficacy and independence. And it's something to begin enabling your student athlete to do that and exhibit that in as many ways possible. We're constantly, drilling our kids and taking our kids through the processes of handling processes and applications and things like that. So this part of managing their own profile is an example of that. Is a great exercise in getting them accustomed to what it's going to be like to be on top of things when they're on campus. And if they can't be on top of things, if they're letting a lot of things fall through the cracks, that's a clear sign. But at the same time, that as a parent, right, you cannot spoon feed and hand hold them through the entire process from end to end. You can help facilitate certain things, you can guide them, you can support, right? But when they're on campus, they're on their own. And you hope
Right.
that your kid is going to be able to, right, carry that same energy over his college experience.
Exactly. And we do have a question, but I do want to say this before we get to the question is,
Sure.
I remember with both of my children, actually, my son was getting ready for a call. And I said, okay, before you get this call, let's go through some of the questions. And he was like, nah, I don't want to do that. I was like, trust me, let's go through this. And let me see how you would answer some of these questions. And I threw some questions out at him and he was like, nah, I don't think that would work. Whatever, mom, you don't know what you're talking about. But we rehearsed it. And the interesting thing was when he got on the phone and he spoke to the recruiter, sure enough, it was a mimic of what we rehearsed then and there, because I said, you have to be prepared. If they ask you this question, what would you say? If they ask you that question, what would you say? And the same thing with my daughter. It was, she had to be pushed in front. When we did go up and down the East Coast visiting all these schools, as an athlete, one of the things I did ask as a parent is, well, what is it that you saw in my daughter to look at her? So that was my go-to question with all the coaches, because I wanted them to see that I had a vested interest in her whereabouts and what value did you see in my child to want her to be a part of your program? So that was always my go-to question. But the question from Kim Varner is, do student athletes get public speaking presence training?
Good question. I know
And
that.
I would even say, would this even happen in high school? Because, you're preparing these students to speak to coaches.
Yeah, it's interesting. The only thing that I'm aware of now, as a coach in my program, yes, we do, but it doesn't come in a formal, curriculum type of thing. What happens is that we're constantly prepping our kids to deal with the occasional interview with, a press or media, that sort of thing. We happen to have a very successful program. So naturally, we have a lot of kids that get, spotlighted. And so, we usually put people on the spot to respond to the question. How was that race? What did you think were your strengths and weaknesses? What could you have done better? And then they have to articulate, whatever that is. So those are little exercises that people can do routinely. Definitely prep your kid, as you would for a job interview, on how to deal with certain kinds of questions. I know that on the collegiate level, I know personally that a number of my student athletes, even my daughter, that they've had to go through. They were sent out to leadership conferences to learn how to function, operate, and deal in sport and leadership of groups, teams, and units and things of that sort. So that's something that I know exists. Hopefully, that your kid will sign on with a program that encourages that sort of thing. I've seen a lot of kids grow once they moved into the collegiate levels at major conferences and become incredibly strong with regards to how they deal with public communication and things like that. So it's just a matter of the environment and the climate that they're coming into. There's some places where it's not so much. Some Division III schools that there isn't a lot of media behind. Their the sports programs or the sports that they are a part of. You're not going to see a lot of need for those student athletes to get out there and get in front of large audiences. But anybody Division I level major conferences definitely might on occasion find themselves there. So it's all a matter of how much of a job your experience is. Division III is not a job at all. Division II is a little bit more of a job, and Division I is a job. So there's a lot of public life that comes along with that. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
No problem. So just moving right along, when it comes to another thing to also stay on top of, why I want to focus on this slide really quick, is the core courses tip. Family, know what your kids are taking and try to match up the courses that they need, right, to clear, and what your school provides. Now, this next slide talks about the fact that the course list here, right, it basically is a tool within the portal that allows you to search your high school code, right, and it will show the courses that are approved at your school, right, that correspond with the NCAA eligibility guidelines. Okay, so that's important to note, that if you're not sure, and to do this early, do it soon. I mentioned some time ago in a previous talk that at our own schools, we've had schools that, for whatever reason, were named, had names that were catchy and exciting, that were different, that the NCAA did not recognize or acknowledge, although it was, a second year English course, or, a science course or something along those lines, or a history or civics course. So those courses were there and they were legitimate courses, but the way those courses were named in the transcript did not correspond. And so we had to go through a review process for a number of our student athletes who are at one of the city schools in our school district. As I mentioned, we have the STEAM, we have Denzel Washington, and we have our main campus. And it happened to be at the Denzel Washington school that there was a course that wasn't clear. So here, it's a way early on, and as early as you possibly can, folks, is to look at the courses that your kids are taking and see how they match up against the NCAA's requirements, and making sure. And if they don't match up, you need to speak to your guidance counselor and your principal and administration to figure out how to get those courses added to this list that the NCAA has, so they recognize it when it comes up from your school. All right, or to make sure that your school names them accordingly. Okay.
Good information.
You got it. Okay, so here, if anybody needs to quickly get your QR codes, so this will take you to some tools that can quickly get you to the information that I'm sharing right now, that discusses, alternative standards to become a qualifier for Division I. I don't want to belabor this discussion with a lot of the details on each of them. I'll just quickly summarize them, and then just move them on. So we were looking at is, what are we trying to determine in terms of the standards of eligibility for each of the levels of competition in the NCAA: Division I, Division II, Division III. There are 4 possible academic certification outcomes for a student athlete: early academic qualifier, academic redshirt, non-qualifier. Okay, and for Division I. Okay, so important to note that if you're a non-qualified Division I, it could mean that you are qualified for Division II. So that can happen, and there are clear distinctions between the two. All right, so no one should be overly discouraged by it, but much of what plays into why this ends up happening has to do with what I previously discussed, which is the lack of awareness of the courses that were being taken that fulfill the 16 that's needed for the NCAA D1. There's 14 in D2. Okay. Let me see what we got here. Okay. So again, for Division One, you have to complete 14 course units in the required subject field, and the core course GPA 3.0 or better in the required. So this is for like quick, fast track, straight on in, no questions asked. You are already an early qualifier for Division One. It's beautiful when you have this. When the kid is able to go on official visits at the end of their junior year, over the summer and in the fall season, it's great when they're getting it done in the classroom, they're getting it done on the track, or on the field, and in the weight room, and they're showing all the positive signs that coaches and institutions and NCAA want to see to get this process going. This is the opportunity that a lot of kids have as an early academic qualifier to get early decision, early action, and full rides. I know that UVA, University of Virginia, will put things on the table for student athletes who are ready to go at this stage. And if I'm unless it's changed, I do remember that as student athletes who were recruited from UVA, they felt that if the money wasn't spent by the fall, it was gone, and it was going to be gone, and it was going to be used elsewhere. So coaches needed to sign people very early, and other schools are the same. There's some, I believe a lot of ACC schools may be in that category.
So we do have a comment out here. I just want to say,
Yeah.
just to let you know, this is wow, really good information. So you're doing a good job providing this information. And what I like about the information that you're presenting, especially for younger student athletes or younger athletes, even thinking like eighth graders, when you start high school, it is so important. If you have plans or aspirations or dreams, desires to go into Division One, your GPA matters. So your freshman year matters.
Yes.
Really take to heart your grades and focus on getting a decent GPA, so that if you want, the student part comes first. You're a student athlete, and the NCAA is going to look at your grades to determine where you fit into their programs.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important because as you're gonna see later on in the slide, it's gonna state that there has to be 7 semesters of pure strength from the very beginning, and that's where a lot of kids struggle. Mind you, scenario A is the ideal, right? Scenario B, which is the next slide, it involves a bit more finesse. It gives you that chance to play catch up, but the scenario A is what everybody wants to have, and it does require you to have a strong start in your high school academic career. Absolutely, there's no exception. But if you happen to trip up and, and need a little bit of a forgiveness and an opportunity to kind of redeem yourself, this is where you do it. In scenario B, you can add additional courses, electives, and things along those lines, which brings you to that 16 number, which is the majority of student athletes who come through the process. So you got to make sure you have this number. Scenario C is, again, you're an applicant that is able to get athletic aid, practice, and compete. Now, all scenario A and B, you can have a scholarship, you can practice, and you can compete. You have to meet the core progression. You have to, and show, increasing strength and the turnaround in your academic performance. You got to complete, 16 core courses units, right, in the required subject. Remember, 14, right, with the gold standard, but 16 here. And then you get 2.3 or better will give you a shot at at being able to, again, get athletic aid, practice, and compete. Now, mind you, notice it says 2021, 2022, 2022, 2023. This 2.3 GPA is an exception for the COVID years.
Okay,
Oh,
I was wondering because that was not the GPA when my daughter was
no,
going through the process.
that is for COVID years only. And this is the part, this is why when I spoke to you about what we're going to talk about today, Lisa, that I stressed that it's important that this information be shared, is that this is finite. This is not going to last forever. All right. 2.3, all right, or better will give you a shot at it. Okay.
So you're using the word shot. I'm listening to you. You said that a couple of times. You get a shot.
Yep.
So there's a
Right.
possibility that even with a 2.3 GPA,
Right.
you may not.
Because a coach has to vote his conscience, and
Okay.
whether or not this kid is going to make it, past this initial year. Um, you know, right now every coach wants a strong athlete, but they want a strong student athlete because they want to make sure that they can play this kid, right, at some point. And if you're struggling just to stay above water, then you may find yourself being passed over, regardless of what your strengths are. I mean, you have to be running, shooting all out the moon. You know what I mean? Or you know what I mean? You have to be able, you have to be a 5-star in every respect for them to, look past the fact that there's a 2.3. But there are a lot of circumstances that play into why. All right. And it has to do with, again, the effect and the impact of this pandemic on your life, on your learning environment, on your community. There's so many things. So for now, they're willing to make that exception, again, for the 2021-22 class and for the 22-23 class. Okay, and as always, at the end of the process, they must submit proof of graduation to the Eligibility Center. That's usually around that last transcript right after graduation that you usually send out in July and August, or they'll send out July and August. You must stay on top of your guidance offices. Everybody wants to shut down and close out for the year and neglect to send out those final transcripts. I've had kids who were like just barely able to get in for housing in time because they didn't have clearance from their compliance office to be on campus, much less start playing the sport, because the school has failed to deliver the final transcript. So the proof of graduation is on that final transcript. Folks, for your seniors, graduating seniors, you must stay on top of them. They must feel your presence when it comes to that particular document. All right, it is important. Yep. All right. This is again more about Division I qualifiers. Again, additional criteria for that scenario C, which is the lengthy roundabout long route that you got to take when you're really struggling to fight back to get your standard accepted, your performance accepted and meeting the standard for clearance. So it's important to note that there's scenario A, B, and C. And scenario C is the way you can get there, especially when you have a kid that, may have not had the strongest start, but, they're making a great effort to have a strong finish. And so this is their chance at that. All right. So the academic red shirt, right? First athletic year athletic aid, first term practice, but you cannot play. Okay. And you have, to complete the courses, you got 2.0 is what you come in with. All right. But you have to show proof of graduation. But there's you got to definitely prove yourself more as a student, all right, than an athlete. You're known to be an athlete, and there are kids who are worth, for a lot of schools, worth academically redshirting. And if they have deep enough pockets, they'll do it. Schools that run lean may not, don't have that kind of budget. A lot of Texas schools have the budget to do it. But that's an option for some people to come in and do that. Some schools will let you redshirt and give you only a partial towards it. But you got to be a special kind of athlete to get a full academic redshirt. Okay. All right. So again, these are more of the criteria of what's needed and what kind of plays into, how you get that academic red shirt. I'm
I have
speeding
a
right
question
along.
with the red shirt.
Let's go.
Okay. So when you're offered a scholarship, and they say you're redshirted,
Right.
does that mean that you lose a year of eligibility?
No. An academic red shirt, you got 5 years to complete four. So you don't get that fifth year back because there's room for you. You take your fifth year up front as an academic red shirt.
Okay.
There are kids who get medical red shirts, right? Or where they would get an injury, and my baby cousin, Kyra, she was at Duke. She was a point guard over there, and she had get two knee surgeries. She was oh wow, it was in a game against Hampton, by the way, that she got injured.
Oops, so sorry.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I digress. But that's what happened. But she fought back, but she had the again, it was the academic, it was a medical red shirt, so she was able to get it all back, and then she was able to play the remainder of her career out at Duke, and then actually do a graduate year at University of Texas, and played there as well. So you don't lose a lot, as long as there's some justification behind the medical. But for academic red shirt, you get that, you use that up front 1 year. So I don't know that you get another chance. I don't know enough about that.
Okay.
But yeah, that's how that works.
So I do want to say we have a dear friend of mine, Maisha. She said, Amari and I are listening. Anything with sports gets his attention. So we do have a student also watching here tonight. So
Welcome, Amari. Thanks for listening. Appreciate you. Okay, let's move on. So again, non-qualifiers. There's no athletic aid, no practice, no competition. Right? You can pay your own tuition to go to a school that you really want to go to, and walk on and try to fight your way on by proving first that you can handle the schoolwork. Otherwise, you are looking at other alternatives, such as
so
juking.
that's wait,
Yes,
that's a good question.
yes,
Okay, so we hear a lot about walk-ons, right?
right,
You you were not recruited, but
right,
you did get accepted into a school,
right,
and you are a, let's say, a pretty decent athlete, or I won't go say superior, but really strong. Let's
right,
say really strong, and you decide that you want to walk on.
right.
How does that work at a Division I school?
Well, the thing is, one is if you're admitted to the college university, that's one thing. If you know what I mean, if you're admitted as a student, which it's happened, I've seen kids who were admitted as students, but they were non-qualifiers to compete as student athletes because they didn't have the courses, the appropriate courses that were needed. So what does that mean? So your legacy at Ole Miss, right? And you got to go to Ole Miss. You have no choice. But you did not meet the NCAA guidelines, but yet you were accepted into the school in the baccalaureate program. Well, then you then have to deal with whatever your compliance, whatever the NCAA suggests is what's needed, to basically make you a eligible student athlete to compete. That's like one of the wildest scenarios you'll ever find. I don't know that that's going to happen very often because there are other pathways that a student athlete may want to take, either go to JUCO or to look at going to a Division II school and do a 2-4 transfer, or a Division I to Division II to Division I transfer, or do a 2-4 transfer from JUCO. Those are the options that the pathways that most take. It's a risk, right? You're really like rolling the dice if you're saying, well, I'm gonna prove to them that I can handle the work at Duke, right? As a student athlete, and try to walk on with probably a place that tends to get uh, 5 or 10 of the top 25 ball players in the country every year. So it may not be in your best interest to do that because you still got to play, you still got to train, you still got to keep yourself fit. You're trying to keep that sport as a job, right? As a student athlete, but it's a job, like I said before. So if you're trying to walk on, it's very difficult, because you find that student athletes who are not officially on roster have to find ways to gather resources for themselves. They have to, compete for, training space. They have to compete for facilities, for, sports medicine. They don't have the same control and influence on their academic schedules as the student athletes that have certain kinds of things that are done on their behalf. Housing, things like that. There's a lot of things that a student athlete at Division I, Division II level benefits from that an everyday civilian on the campus has to find a way and to make it. You have to be very determined to do it. And some can do it. Some have the financial wherewithal to be able to do that. Many don't. So
Right.
that's really what kind of plays into how someone's able to successfully attain that. So it's worked. There's success stories that where that's actually happened, and I've seen people try, but try to find another way, and then you find yourself in a long route towards graduation because you got to transfer out, you lose credits, and start all over again. It's a hassle. So it's better to be decisive and be clear on the pathways. And I think it's helpful that the NCAA lays out these pathways as the pathways because it enables, I think, a lot of student athletes to at least stay on track, you know what I mean, and follow a course of action that's sensible in one way, shape, or form. No one wants to hear they got to go to JUCO for 2 years first before they can get a scholarship. But I've seen a ton of guys that done that. They're already in their 4-year programs after doing the 2 years of JUCO, which they dreaded, but they did it, and they're doing well. So it's temporary. It's just a part of the process, but it does work. Is it perfect? I don't know, but it's a pathway nonetheless. All right, so let's move on here. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, very important, folks. Okay, the SATs. Last time I spoke a year ago, I shared that the standardized test scores for the SATs are not going to be counted or evaluated or needed for NCAA clearance for 2020, 21, 2020, 22, 21, 22, and 2022, 23 academic years. This is for the NCAA Eligibility Center is not going to use your SAT scores for or against you at all.
So similar to the college application process, the NCAA is kind of following suit where some schools, so now I just want to be clear, some schools are going test optional, some
Yeah.
schools are going test blind. So the for just these academic years, and because of COVID and understanding some of the difficulties that students have come across um, in order to take the test,
Mm-hmm.
they're allowing this
This provision. Yeah.
thank you.
Absolutely. Yep.
Take the words out of my mouth, please.
It's okay. It's all good. Yeah. Yeah. They're making it. Yeah. So they made it clear. But, I'm still encouraging my guys to take their SAT test. Only because, at some point, I believe that because coaches are still asking what were your SAT scores, even though the NCAA is not asking. Coaches are asking how'd you do on your SATs, just as
Interesting.
and they're not obligated to say anything, but you wonder, okay, well, why does it matter if the NCAA is not holding it against you? And I think it has to do with that coaches are competing, sports are competing amongst each other, or assistant coaches. If there are 3 or 4 assistant coaches, they're all responsible for recruiting, and each one wants to get their recruit in and signed, right? So they want to make sure they're bringing the strongest package, right, and to the table when it comes to recruits, and they're going to look for all the bells and whistles to come along with that applicant. And if there's money, see, that's the other thing. A lot of schools like to spend other people's monies first. Okay. They will look at the strongest student athletes. that can draw down on available dollars at the college or university based on academic achievement. And they will draw down those dollars first. Once they've maxed out with this kid on that money, that's either enough money to right substantiate. All right, I can give this kid 2,000 of athletic money, give him a national letter of intent. He's signed, he's funded, he's good, he's happy. She's good, she's happy. Um, that's one way to go about it. And many students can't compete and qualify for those funds unless they submit something like test scores, right, to compete. So that is part, in some cases, your entry into the selection process for, the entry for scholarship money. So, and coaches want that because they would, unless, again, unless you are, you know, shooting out the moon, you need to be able to find some way to stretch your budget, and many successfully are able to do that by getting a larger recruit class that is strong academically, that could draw down on academic money. Okay.
Interesting.
Yep. Okay. Of course. Da, 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 da. All right. So when students enter ninth grade, they have 4 years, 8 semesters to complete their core course requirements. They must graduate on time with their class. This is a core course time limitation, right? The Eligibility Center will use the best combination of courses to meet the 10-7 requirement. Courses can be repeated or replaced so long as they are not needed to meet the 10-7 requirement, right? It's important when students enter the ninth grade, again, repeat, they have 4 years, 8 semesters to complete their core course requirement. They must graduate on time with their class. All right. So it's going to be difficult if somebody has to hold over for one more year or an extra semester or summer school or something like that. It's not a good look. So these are, again, more the reason why parents need to stay on top of the courses and where the courses fit in the NCAA Eligibility Center's guidelines.
And the students need to be proactive with their grades.
Yes, I knew you were going to say something along that line, Coach. Go ahead.
As a mom,
get on them now. Yeah.
but and like I said, it was a little different. You needed the same criteria, but it wasn't talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest, it wasn't talked about as much. I am now hearing more about this, and I think because I don't know what year it changed, but it was encouraged that students fill out or register for the Eligibility Center earlier, like at least by their sophomore year, so that they can be recruited by the NCAA. Mm-hmm. So with my children, we didn't have to worry about that. I just heard it by word of mouth. Hey, did you do this yet? And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And that's why I feel like these conversations these tips are really important for those parents who just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, there's stories, and I guess this is for another conversation, but there's a little bit of a back history with the NCAA in terms of how this whole clearinghouse process came into being. In terms of, there were just certain segments of our society that weren't supposed to, be savvy with this process, because people were very uncomfortable with, the way, when you look on TV, right? You look at TV and you look at, big conference games, basketball games, football games. Alumni were growing very uncomfortable with how there was an imbalance of certain types of people that were getting a lot more spotlight, shining opportunity than others. So it began to start to tighten up on certain things that obviously was going to exploit, right, the disparities in terms of the academic experiences of students in this country. And so the NCAA began to exploit that. And here we are. So we end up with a clearinghouse. This was somewhere around 1992, 1993, because it was during my first year of coaching high school that I had to experience the first class of student athletes that had to go through the clearinghouse process. And it was very challenging. And you realized that more and more of the kids were not clearing than that were clearing. And so it changed the dynamic in terms of who's getting through. So it became incumbent upon me to learn a bit more about this process. So I've been tracking and following this process since 1993, 92, actually 1991, when my first set of college bound student athletes were looking about and applying for schools. That this clearinghouse was just thrown out there as like this, this ominous dark cloud that they had to like deal with. But now we know, and now that there's and in fact, the NCAA had to come to grips and come to terms with the fact that there's these disparities, and have done a lot more to do outreach. All this information that I'm sharing with you is not secret. It's public domain. It's stuff that anybody can access on the NCAA site. It wasn't as accessible back in the day. It was super elusive. I was very fortunate to have a friend that was legal counsel at the NCAA who I can call and was very forthcoming with information about about the process and ways to get around it. So if I ever had a question, I was able to make that phone call. Not everybody had that hookup. So yeah, so that's what it is. So this is how it is, and this particular slide talks about, as parents, right, and kids, if you're looking at your schedule in terms of where you're at, right, look at this, right, whatever grade you're in, ask yourself, is what I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing to be on track? All right. And begin asking the questions. Right. You should meet with your guidance counselor. Matter of fact, don't wait for that slip to come and an announcement come for you to come down to see a counselor. All right. Find a way to get on his calendar ASAP, and have that conversation about where you're at this point in time. I had a great parent last year, who, my kid just got signed this past year during COVID. But there was a outstanding question as to what was the nature of the social science that they were taking. What was it? Was it eligible? Was it compliant? Was it not? And the guidance office pushed back, and they were very insistent that everything is official. The board of ed this and the board of ed that. The state board this, state board that. And they were like insisting and just going about as if they can do no wrong, until they come to the realization that it was that issue that I discussed about the fact that the way the course was named was not unacceptable, and it was going to affect the student athlete. It affected the student athlete in some way. So that's important to know. All right, folks. So this is what you need to do. Take a screenshot of this. This is your cheat sheet to get through your conversation with your guidance counselor. All right, and there's also, here's a QR scan to get to some FAQs and some help on the issue. Lisa, how are we on time?
We've been talking a bit. People are still watching.
Okay, so I'm gonna keep rolling until you tell me otherwise. All right. Okay. All right. So Division 2 is a little bit different. This is just to talk about that. Again, it's 14 courses and GPA 2.5. You have to meet some of the same criteria. You don't get the 10 and 7, right? That's different. It's a little bit different. You fall a bit short with a lower GPA, and at one point it was a lower SAT score also. But Division 2 is still very strong opportunities, and it's a great option. All right. Again, the partial qualifier. Again, they lowered the GPA standard. All right. Okay. It talks about 2 years of English, 2 years of math, 2 years of natural science, 3 years of additional courses, English, math, natural, physical science, 2 years of social science, 4 years of additional courses in any area listed. All right. So student athletes that do not meet D2 qualifier standards will be deemed a partial qualifier, and they still must submit proof of graduation at the end. Again, standardized test scores are excluded. All right. And this is QR on that.
Okay. Can you go back to the QR code for a little bit? Because Maisha said she missed the list and QR code.
I'm sorry.
What we'll also do is have these in the chat or something. We can do that later on. Or
I'll send you the whole presentation, Lisa. You can just make it available to the listening audience.
Okay, great.
No problem. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll keep that there for another minute. Well, not
Not a
10
minute.
seconds. All right. All right. So I will. Can I move now?
Yes, you can go ahead.
All right. Cool. All right. In Division Three, and as I mentioned before, Division Three is a little different in that each Division Three college or university determines its own eligibility for admission, financial aid, practice, and competition. All right. The NCAA Eligibility Center does not perform certifications for Division Three college-bound student athletes. Division Three student athletes may register for a free profile page, but it is not required. Okay, I encourage student athletes to do so because Division Three colleges and universities still look through them to find eligible prospects that may not necessarily off the bat fit into the 1 and 2 profile. They know what belongs in the 1 and 2 profile, but they're like they want to give you a chance too, and you can start seeing mail and outreach from them if you put yourself in there. And it's free and available publicity. But I encourage you to do it. All student athletes should do it, and all coaches should require your student athletes to do it. Again, so that they can just be engaged in the process. Because even if they're not engaged with the NCAA through the recruitment process and the eligibility center, when you're a student athlete at Division 1 or 2 or 3 level, you're still going to have to deal with compliance with NCAA regulation. So it's better to get them started now. Okay. They have certain criteria for distance learning. All right. Remember, during COVID, it was a big question in terms of how to deal with the way kids were learning and how did that factor into their experience or their eligibility and their clearance. This is all to say that distance e-learning, right, and even homeschooling, right, they become eligible for the automatic waiver, all right, for COVID. But these are things that I'm not sure. I know for 2020, 2021, 2022, it was an automatic waiver. And notice they didn't say anything about 2022, 2023. I don't know if it's automatic. That may just mean that you have to go through a review process for those class years. Okay. Okay. Then there's the amateurism, right? Sports participation when a student registers for certification account, right? Final amateurism is important. This is not something that I'm going to spend too much time on. All it is asking whether or not you've been paid professionally to play a sport, and that as a professional athlete. Some of you may or may not be aware. I think it was a JR. Is it JR? Is it JRE? I'm sorry. JR. I think it's JR. One of the ball players. He left professional basketball. Is now playing NCAA golf for North Carolina A&T. All right. So he can never play basketball for North Carolina A&T, but he sure can make their golf team. Okay. And there's a lot of individuals who've played professional sports in one way, but ended up going back to college, back to school to play in another sport. And they're completely okay as long as they've never played professionally in that sport. All right.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's happened a lot of times. There are a lot of athletes that are playing college sports that, are playing, newer sports for the first time. It's crazy. I don't know. I still think it's like, you bring in a ringer, but, I don't know. That's my opinion. But it's all good. It's a great opportunity, and I'm happy for JR. So I don't know a lot about the image and likeness
You know
guidelines.
what? Don't worry about it because we have someone coming on tomorrow who's going to
Awesome.
talk about this.
Beautiful.
So
Awesome.
that was good. That's a good plug. And I can
Yes.
actually say, after tonight's show, you'll get the promo will be up, but Monique AJ Smith is going to talk about name, image, and likeness and the possibilities. So I'll leave it at that.
And I'm stopped. I'm now no longer sharing. And that concludes my little piece on the NCAA eligibility process and how to get recruited.
Well, thank you, Amado, as always. Lots of great information, especially balancing everything that's been going on with COVID and understanding how the NCAA is lightening up some of their requirements for this time, and just really working with the athletes and understanding that some athletes may have, when they were in school, dealing with distance learning and going through that pass fail instead of getting a grade. All of that has been going on the last couple of years, and some athletes might be worried about that. So
Mhm.
providing this information is really helpful.
I'm glad it's helpful, and I hope everybody has a successful recruiting process, and and at the same time is able to identify the school. One of the things that I also want to emphasize is that you have a great opportunity, um, to do a reverse engineering of the place that you want to go, in terms of the schools that you want to attend. Um, it's a great opportunity right now, from a recruiting standpoint, um, to identify coaches and evaluate coaches on the basis of the quality of the program that they run. Okay, and I encourage a lot of parents to make decisions on on the different, look up this thing called the 9 domains of quality coaching, right? The 9 domains of quality coaching, so that you can go down the list of questions to ask a coach in terms of how they run their program, down to their coaching philosophy, to the way they measure success, failure, the kind of environment and climate that they create, what type of analysis tools that they use to determine what their hopes are for your kid. How do they enable a student to have a stake in their own success, and how do they engage, and how do they respond to families? Because you asked the question before about, well, are you an outsider or an insider? Well, you ask that question up front. Ask that question up front as to whether or not a coach is going to accept you as a contributor and as a party in this whole 4 year process or 5 year process with your child. Very important, because once they've said it, right, you've got them, right. You gotta mark the day and the time in which they said, and always bring it up again whenever you can. And as long as you stay present in that in your child's student athlete experience, they won't soon forget that.
I will say this: there was one school that was recruiting my son, and it was a hike. It was really further. It's probably the furthest school that he was interested in, or they were interested in him. And I made the comment to the to the recruiting coach, and I said, "This school is kind of far. I really like to attend games." And the comment that I received was, "Well, we stream our games."
Mm.
As a parent, you really don't want to hear that. And I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe not this school."
Mm.
Um, we do have a comment here that said, "Yes, very important to know the coach. Will they will they care about your child?
Yeah, yeah, it's important. It's really important.
Will they care about your child?" And that is really true, because I think in some cases, are you recruited for the win, or are
Mhm.
you recruited for, why are you being, I mean, yes, all schools want to win their games, but there should be a level of interest. And I did see that while out, especially more so with my daughter,
Mhm.
when we were going to different schools. There was one school that had their alumni come in and mentor the players,
Oh
which
wow.
I thought was really nice and different. It's really important. And I'll say this as a parent, when I was shopping my children, and it feels like you were shopping your child around,
Mhm.
um, really ask those questions, get to know, because there's a time where the child, the athlete, will be away, and you have the opportunity to sit and talk with the coach or sit and talk with the admissions office about certain things. And I would strongly suggest that you have your list of questions there,
Mhm.
and really find out about the program, find out about the institution, find out how they're going to treat your child, and how your child is going to graduate in the time that's allowed because they are working as an athlete and they are studying as a student. So, really getting that balance across. But
Absolutely. Has to be a success plan for your kid. It has to be
I
all
like
part of
that.
the deal. And for all the, and for the teammates, and it has to be an environment that thrives on, achievement. You got to be around other student athletes that want to have good grades, that want to be accountable, with that like to train, that like to work, like to sweat. If you have a culture that is imbalanced and your kid is one of very few, then it's a struggle. And coaches will tell you the sun, moon, and the stars, that everything is fine and dandy, and this is the up and coming of the greatest program in sports history. But at the end of the day, once you sign those papers, they're signed away. At that point, you can say whatever. But it's important to know, going back to, knowing what it is that, the student athletes' rights, the NCAA has now bent so much in the favor of the student athlete that, and that all you need to do is just avail yourself of the opportunity just to go through and understand what those rights are, and your kids should be okay. And then to remind them, they don't want you, the coach that wants you as far and away as possible, who doesn't want you anywhere near the compliance officer, doesn't want you anywhere near the athletic director, doesn't want you anywhere near anybody that can basically raise the issue or question that they're doing something scrupulous. And that's something that you got that should be a red flag.
Hmm.
And the way,
Definitely.
yeah, that's a red flag. And they should be comfortable talking with a parent and talking with a student athlete, and hopefully they're truthful. If somebody is accustomed to being deceitful and shifty and constantly varying and changing, that's not going to work, because you can't trust that person, and definitely not going to trust that person with your kid. So it's a very big deal to scrutinize the coach, and don't get overly enamored by the institution and the thrill and the novelty of being signed to a big name, or just the fact that you got a full ride. Honestly, it's sad when you see that people have like tripped over themselves to sell the firstborn to literally, right,
Mhm.
to the evil one, and it's sad. But when it happens, and you definitely don't want to just do it for its own sake, you got to ask yourself, where's my kid going to, what's the nearest family to your kid? Where's my son gonna am I gonna get a haircut? Where's she gonna get her hair done? That's important, because you could be out in the middle of East
Middle
Javette,
of.
and okay, and then it's like, oh, wait a minute, there's a lot of things that I don't have readily available to me. So when you go to these college visits, you need to ask those questions, and those are important questions from a cultural standpoint, critical questions to ask. Because they got to feel a sense of home wherever they are, and need to be able to, yeah, they're going to be homesick, right? Because they always want to be, close to where their roots are. But it's important for them to also be able to, be able to get to the things that, keep them, give them a sense of home, and that even their presence, right, is noted and acknowledged. You got to be able to get hair product, skin product, whatever it is you need. I don't That may not be a big deal for y'all, but I got three girls, so, and they're all student athletes, and they're all way in college, and that's a big criteria. So if they were in Durham, if they're in DC, if they're down in in, uh,
Delaware.
in Delaware, they got to be able to get those things. Otherwise, it's a no go. So that's important. And sometimes, and I've seen parents make those very seemingly difficult decision to bypass a full ride to anywhere under the sun, over making a very conscious and deliberate choice for a place that was best suited for their kid. So for me, that to me is a winning situation.
So you said a couple of things that I like. One is you talked about re-engineering the system. I had a trainer actually, that told both of my kids, Don't let the school pick you. You pick the school. Put yourself in a position to pick the school. Uh, Culturally, environmentally, just really look at where you're going and pick the school that is the best fit for you. And that's something that we say here at Campus Bound GPS. Let's get you into a school that's the best fit. So gave a lot, Amado, you gave a lot of information. I want to thank you as always. You know, breaking down the eligibility center, breaking down the information, the data, and understanding the difference between Division One, Division Two, Division Three, and even going over the nuances for in regards to COVID and what the eligibility center is requiring now, which will change in a few years. So lots of information, lots of, please folks, if you missed any part of it, definitely check out the replay. Great information. Anything else you want to wrap up with and say, Amado?
No, thank you again for giving me the opportunity to share this information. It's always a blast. I love the work that you do. You do great work, and you're going to help a lot of people, Lisa. Keep it
Thank you
going.
so much. Well, that's it for wow. Day 21. Thank you, Amado, for wrapping us and getting us towards day 21. It's a wrap. Uh, I'm excited. We are off to day 22. And as I mentioned, Monique AJ Smith will be our guest for tomorrow. She is the leadership strategist. She will be talking about NIL, name, image, and likeness in regards to student athletes. And it should be a great conversation. So, you know, if you want to learn more about what the changes are that are going on for the NCAA, especially, you know, moving forward with athletes and being able to monetize, stay tuned tomorrow and we'll talk about that. So again, Amado, thank you. All of you watching, thank you. Kim Varner said, great job, you two. You two, proud of you. Thank you, our classmate from high school and my classmate from college.
Thank
I
you.
thank you all for tuning in. And good night. We'll see you tomorrow. And please, please, please be safe.
Bye.
Bye bye.